This weekend, 3 things will be happening. On Saturday, it'll be my wife's birthday, and then on Sunday, the 26th, it'll be 2 of the crown jewel racing events of the racing season. First will be the Monaco Grand Prix, and then the ultimate in high-speed racing, the Indy 500. Not only is the Indy 500 one of the 3 crown jewel events along with Monaco and Le Mans, it's also one of the oldest races in the world. The first 24 hours of Le Mans was in 1923, the first Monaco Grand Prix was in 1929, but the first Indy 500 was back in 1911. So when people say it's pre-war, it's pre-First World War, let alone Second World War. It's a pretty old race. So like Le Mans, it's a race of tradition. It's pretty much the same thing every year. 2020 and the 2 world wars excluded because it was not held in 1917 and 18 because America had joined World War I, and then 1942 to 45 because of America joining World War II. In 2020, the race was held in August behind closed doors due to the mayhem caused by the lockdowns, which annoyed a lot of people because they were either very set in tradition or wanted to go and watch, or both. But at least there was still a race, even if it was a bit weird that nobody was there. So what I thought I'd do for this week's worth of videos in the run-up to the Indy 500 is talk through how the qualifying for the Indy 500 might be the best thing that you'll watch all year. So, the month of May, as it's often called. The whole month in IndyCar will be devoted to this one event. Such is the big deal that it is for IndyCar. Indy tradition is that the first practice sessions would have started on the 1st of May, on opening day as they call it, where people will try and get their cars out and be the first on track so they can say that they were the first people out there for the month of May. And this is something the smaller teams would try and do because being the first car on track was a big deal, and if you could get some column inches with your car, then at least you'd won something in this time. But since 1974, the first practice session is now 2 or 3 weeks before race day. Things have also changed in regards to the rookie tests and the refresher courses. Kyle Larson's first test was back in October, for instance, and another test happened at Texas in March. Really, it's a safety thing. Not even Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, Graham Hill, Emerson Fittipaldi, Fernando Alonso, you name them, above this test. Like, nobody's exempt. If you're a rookie, you're doing the rookie test. Not even Max Verstappen is above it, and it's essentially a test of can you get this car around safely enough, because while they don't look like they're going particularly fast, an impact with the wall is typically above 200 miles an hour. The first official practice sessions are when the veteran drivers get to go out and do their thing and sort of get used to the track, get used to the conditions, get used to the cars, get used to driving at these insane speeds, and get the basic setups down and lay some rubber down and other bits and pieces like that so that they can, well, just get on with it, really. This year, rain has intermittently come, which has reduced on-track time. And then you have something called happy hour later on in the day. And this makes things interesting because it's the final hour of the practice session. What happens is, the sun is now low enough in the sky that the conditions improve drastically, because the grandstands being in the way of the sun will cover the vast majority of the track in shadow, which reduces the track temperature and allows for faster lap times. Now this doesn't happen in the same way that it used to because in 2006 the state of Indiana started using daylight savings, so the sun is now higher in the sky at around 5 PM, so the speeds don't increase quite like they used to. But a fun fact, there are small pockets of Indiana in the northwest and southwest of the state next to the Illinois border that are on Central Time rather than Eastern Time, and it's not the only state where this happens. Still, it can't be as weird as the Canadian province of Newfoundland and Labrador, where Newfoundland, the island off the eastern coast, is something like 3 hours 30 behind London, and the mainland part, Labrador, is 4 hours behind, but only a small portion of the southern part of the province uses daylight savings time while the other does something else. Canada and America are massive. So, all of this out of the way then allows us to move on towards qualifying. Now, unlike in Formula 1, IndyCar uses average speed to determine position on the starting grid. Because having the time down as a 38.665 isn't as impressive as saying that they did this particular speed over this many laps. Putting it down a speed is way more impressive, and it can take you a while to get your head around that if you are used to just having a time. Then the extra maths to work out the speeds can be a little bit much. But the best way of doing it is, don't bother. Just look at the speeds. It's like when British people go to drive in Spain or Americans go to drive in Canada and they go, I don't understand kilometers. Right, you're overthinking. Stop. So Indy 500 qualifying has all 34 cars, which was the amount on the entry list this year. It could be more, it could be, well, just 33, because 33 is the maximum, and everybody gets at least one guaranteed run. They go out on track alone, and they get 4 timed laps, but timed by speed rather than time, although you convert the time into speed. Yeah, it can be a little bit confusing if you're brand new to this, and they actually get 2 warm-up laps to get up to speed before they go and bomb it around the track. They get 2 warm-up laps, after which they have to commit or come back in. Now, what they'll do is they'll take the average speed over those 4 laps, and then that 4-lap average speed will be used to determine the position on the starting grid. I hope you follow me here. To calculate it, you can do the following. 3,600, that's the amount of seconds in 1 hour, and then you divide that 3,600 by the lap time in seconds, and then you multiply that by 2.5, which is the length of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in miles. And it's miles, not kilometers, because, well, this is America. And in a way, and I don't know about you, 200 miles an hour sounds a lot cooler than 320 kilometers an hour. So if you do a 40-second lap of the speedway, you do 3,600 divided by 40 and multiply that by 2.5, which gives you 225 miles an hour lap speed. Even for somebody whose brain is melted by maths, that's a pretty easy thing to do. And if you reverse engineer the equation a bit, you can probably get the lap time in seconds, but like already mentioned, it's probably best that you just avoid all of that and take the speeds, because if you're going to be doing all the maths, you're going to be missing something. Sorry. Math. To streamline the process, what they'll do is they'll take that 3,600 and divide that by the 4-lap cumulative time in seconds, so 125 seconds, 130 seconds, however long it is, and then they'll multiply that by 10 instead, because 4 laps of IMS is 10 miles. So what happens here is, let's say a driver does 38, 38, 39, 40. That's a total of 155 seconds, or just over 2.5 minutes. 10 miles in 2.5 minutes is proof enough that these things are rapid. 3,600 divided by 155 and multiplied by 10. 232.258 miles an hour. In this weekend's qualifying, that speed over 4 laps was good enough for 5th on the grid. What you'll also find is that the cars will appear to be driving diagonally in a straight line, which might seem a bit counterproductive because, well, you're just making the lap longer, aren't you? But at the same time, you're actually hitting a higher top speed, so you might think that the higher top speed you're reaching is cancelling out the fact that you've driven probably, I don't know, 100 yards, 200 yards, however long further, but it's all because of the way the cars are set up. Indy cars are set up to fall over to the left. Because of the asymmetric setup they run, they want to naturally pull to the left on the straights. So by letting the car drift, you're actually taking the path of least resistance in doing so, because you're not turning the car to the right to keep it in a straight line, and the tyres aren't being scrubbed as hard. While letting the car drift, you can make anti-roll bar adjustments and adjustments to the weight jacker without having to spend time focusing on keeping the car right up against the wall to open up turns 1 and 3. And there's also some aero wash from the wall too at those speeds. However, while it is actually faster or not is debatable, because tests have been done in wind tunnels and found it faster to let the car drift, but on the computer simulations, it's slower to let the car drift. Mike Hull, who was on the Marshall Pruitt podcast a few years ago, said that staying right is faster, but convincing the drivers that it is faster has been a hard task. Much like everything else with the 500, it's a case of, well, we've been doing this for 997 years, we're not changing now. Now, qualifying is over 2 days. After day 1, positions 13 down to 30 are locked in. Everybody below 30 gets to go into a last chance qualifier, while the top 12 go into the fast 12. We'll start with the Fast 12. The top 12 qualifying drivers will do their runs, and after a period of time, these are then split into the top 6 and the bottom 6. The bottom 6 are locked in, while the top 6 will go out later on and battle for pole. The pit lane will also be split into 2 lanes that teams and drivers can use tactically, and this is done in the Saturday session too. The first lane is a safety lane, which means if you've done a time, you keep that time, but you'll have to sit in a queue and wait for the next opportunity to go back on track, which is useful if you think you're not going to go much better on your next run or at all. The second lane is a priority lane, so cars in this lane will be given priority over the cars in the other queue, but will have their fastest time deleted. This can be useful when time is starting to run down or temperatures have dropped and you absolutely have to have another go, but it's high risk if you don't beat your deleted time. The Fast 12 session yesterday started at 3 PM Indiana time, whereby positions 7 down to 12 were locked in, and then begins the bumping. The reason for the last chance qualifier, or bump day as the Sunday is known, is because only 33 cars can start the race. It's tradition, much like everything else. For the 2024 event, there were 34 cars attempting to make the grid. When Alonso was bumped, it was 36 cars that were attempting to make the grid. Sometimes it's been more than that, but at the end of the day's running, 33 cars will be locked in, and those that don't make it will have to watch from the sidelines. It's a bit like how Formula 1 used to whittle 30 down to 26. So the same rules apply for those going for the back rows of the grid from position 31 down to whatever the last car is. They get one guaranteed run with each car allowed 2 warm-up laps to get up to speed, and then they do their times. After which, they use the same system as before. They use lane 1 or lane 2, and they get as many attempts as they want so long as it's done with time on the board. At the end of this year's session, it was Nolan Siegel who failed to make the grid, and he crashed on his final attempt. It's after the bump day stuff that the Fast 6 will then go out and battle for pole, and because it's later on in the day, the sun has gone down a bit, the track is drenched in shadow, and it means that the track temperature is a little bit lower, and maybe the air temperature is a bit lower as well. So it means that, well, these cars are going to be going fast. The 3 Penske cars locked out the front row since it's a 3-wide start, and people online have been going, well, isn't that convenient given the fact that the bloke who owns the team also owns the series and they've already been done for cheating. But the thing is, McLaughlin banged in a ridiculous 234.220 4-lap average speed, which is the fastest 4-lap average ever at Indianapolis. Will Power was only 0.009 miles an hour off McLaughlin, with last year's winner Joseph Newgarden in 3rd. Kyle Larson, who is doing double duty this weekend, is in 5th, and by double duty he's going to do Indy and then fly out to another race in NASCAR in the afternoon. And this has been attempted before by several drivers, but nobody has managed to win both, at least as far as I can tell. McLaughlin was doing something in the region of 38-second laps of the track. His total cumulative time is around 155.4 seconds or something, which is an average lap time of 38.8, which doesn't sound impressive, but when you see how fast his average speed was across a lap, it puts into perspective just how fast he was going. He drove the equivalent of Manchester city centre up to Rochdale in 2.5 minutes. Now obviously change that to where you live to make it sound a bit more impressive to you. So whatever town, village, city, place is 10 miles away, imagine getting to that place in 2.5 minutes versus the, half an hour on average it would really take. So if I was doing this for me, it would be from here to Stafford in less time than it takes to listen to the song Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, which is utterly unhinged speed. The only things in terms of racing cars that are faster, in a straight line anyway, are NHRA dragsters. And then above that, you're into the realms of these new Chinese high-speed rail things and commercial aircraft. Not many people get to go faster. And the thing is, admittedly, it does look easy. But when you factor in the speed, the concentration, and the fact there's no runoff if you do get it wrong, doing this is knife-edge stuff. The car only has to bounce in the wrong way on a bump once. And that's it. Your tyre only has to lose a modicum of pressure. If the suspension goes, you've had it. If the wind gusts at the wrong moment, you go into A&E. And now we have 60 frame a second 4K cameras recording things in ultra high quality, it looks even easier because everything is presented so smooth. But you still need to be a certain kind of mental to even think about taking this thing on. Because, as I'll say again, that speed was an average over 4 laps. That wasn't even his top speed. Top speed would have been, 240 entering turns 1 and 3 or something along those lines? Most of us are lucky to just do 100 miles an hour, let alone 140 miles an hour. Fastest I've ever been is about 150, 160. Radical SR10 down the Hanger Straight at Silverstone, in the rain, and I was shitting myself. So what's 240 going to be like? Sure, a Formula 1 car will crush an Indy car around a track, there's no denying that. Around the Indy road course, even the worst car on the Formula 1 grid, driven by the worst driver, will be destroying an Indy car. But once an Indy car is tricked out to go around the oval, it'll be leaving an F1 car in the dust, and the F1 car will run out of hybrid go juice trying to keep up. But they're just different cars. A Formula 1 car is a precision-engineered bespoke machine designed to take corners like they're barely existing. An Indy car is built to do road courses, street circuits, and ovals. There's probably only NASCAR that does the same now. But the thing about the Indy 500 is that this side of the Isle of Man is probably the most high-risk event out there, because when it all goes wrong, it will go very wrong. It's more than just turning left with zero skill involved, people. I cannot stress that enough. So what happens between now and the race on Sunday then? Well, it's actually pretty simple. There will be another practice today as teams try to nail down their race setups and do longer runs to make sure everything is as good as they're going to get it. And the reason for all of this is, well, it's just safety. The reason they have so much practice is safety. They're going to be doing lap speeds of well over 220 miles an hour, and they're going to be running in some pretty dirty air as well as doing a bit of pack racing. They need to be safe, and the cars need to be as good as they're ever going to be. The more everything is nailed down, the safer the drivers will be and feel. It might seem like it goes on forever, but there's a perfectly good reason for it. They can also use this practice session to exploit a bit of a loophole in the IndyCar regulations. The engines have to do a minimum of 2,500 miles before they can be changed over. So what they'll do is they'll run the engine until it reaches that 2,500 mile minimum and then just whack in a brand new engine for Carb Day. Carb Day is short for Carburetor Day. It's another one of those Indy 500 traditions where the teams will start fiddling with the carburetors on the cars so that they're calibrated to what they think the conditions will be for the race. The thing is, carburetors haven't been used on an Indy car since 1963, so now while the practice session is still held and the day is still called Carb Day out of tradition, what else, the day is handed over to fan engagement events, concerts and other bits and pieces. This year, the concert on Carb Day will be George Thorogood, the Gin Blossoms and Kid Quill. And to be honest, the best concert on the list I've looked at is 2017. Steve Miller and then the Bare Naked Ladies, or 2018 when it was Train and Blues Traveller. But I guess 38 Special 2015, yeah, 38 Special are pretty decent. But I've put some acts up that have played to show you what kind of acts they've had on in the past. And when you look at the names of the people that have played these Carb Day concerts, it goes to show that IndyCar really does know the average age of its audience. So really what they need is BTS opening up for Taylor Swift. I know you're looking at me as if I'm mental, but you look at the list of the people that have played before, these are all people that last had a hit in the 90s. Does IndyCar want new fans or not? But I know that this video isn't going to convince the F1 elitists that have already made their minds up or anybody that thinks that IndyCar is just turning left and requires no skill. McLaughlin's lap is much like his one that he did at Bathurst about 5 years ago when they said, yeah, sure, 203 is doable, but he's going to have to hook it up. And he did so, with 2 wheels in the dirt at McPhillamy Park. McLaughlin is one of the most underrated racers in the world right now, and he probably won't get the same attention on him because, well, he's not a Formula 1 driver. But to be the man with the fastest 4-lap average speed around Indianapolis, as well as doing another lap of the gods at Bathurst, that's one hell of a record to have. Because outside of Top Fuel drag racing, the Indy 500 qualifying sessions are the only times you're going to see racing cars completely let off the leash. Because, well, Formula 1, they're saving engines and they're saving tyres and they're doing bits and pieces. The cars aren't as on edge as they otherwise probably would, could or should be. Maybe at Monaco because, well, the risks are just so much higher. But when you look at the Indy 500 qualifying sessions, you just realise just, bloody hell, these things are rapid. All that's left to do now is wait until Sunday, when there's going to be 2 big races on, and if I'm being honest, I'm only going to be watching one of them. Indy. So then, some opinions on why Indy 500 qualifying is better than you might have otherwise assumed. If this has given you some food for thought and you think I've made some good points, then, do like the video so I know I've done a good job. And for more stuff from this channel, subscribe and get that Liberty Bell on. Although the Liberty Bell is Philadelphia, isn't it? Bugger. But anyway, subscribe and get that bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the fine folk at Patreon for the continued support. If you want to help keep things running around here, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and bobs that you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks if you want to buy me a coffee and memberships if that's more your thing. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward. Have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.